If you're considering investing in a new construction rental property here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in 2025, you've come to the right place. Especially if you happen to be from either New York or the Bay Area, you probably work in tech, your stock portfolio has gotten a little too big and you want to diversify out of stocks. If that sounds like you, then you are my ideal client. I've sold a ton of new construction rental properties to people just like you. And in case you didn't know, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is the #1 fastest growing metro in the entire country. And honestly, it's amazing that prices aren't already significantly higher than they are. The population here grows by more than 400 people every single day. And if you watch until the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what the market looks like here, why it's great for investment, and everything you can expect as far as cash flow, appreciation, builder incentives, property management, and so on. I'm going to be analyzing 5 potential suburbs you could invest in here, then analyze what the numbers would look like on the typical rental property you'd be able to buy, and I'm also going to provide video tours of several of the actual homes you would be able to buy here today, so you'll be able to actually see the layouts as well as what the finishes look like on the inside. Then we're going to look at what has happened in each of these markets over the last decade and use that data to forecast what could happen over the next decade. So this truly is the ultimate guide. My name is Michael. I own a local real estate brokerage here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've sold hundreds of homes. I've owned as many as 4 rentals at a time myself. I've renovated my last 2 primary residences, and I have a passion for investing in real estate. I actually started out in real estate simply as an investor. And once I saw just how much money totally regular people like myself could make simply by buying houses and holding them, that's when I decided to get licensed and go into real estate full time. So if you're looking to invest in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro, I'd love to connect. I've helped every one of these yellow dots find their little piece of Texas, and I'd love to help you too. Just call, text, or shoot me an email. All that info is in the description below. So first up, who is the ideal new construction investor? This video is for people who have a good amount of cash sitting or stocks that you plan to liquidate and use as cash. I'd say you want to have at least $150K in the bank because you're going to need to put anywhere from $85,000 to $100,000 total cash towards this investment. So if all you have is $100K, then you don't quite have enough because a full $100K is going to have to go to the house. You're obviously still going to need money to live on. Also, this video is for people who have plenty of income and would be able to offset a short-term loss. Now, the goal here is we're going to try to get these properties to break even, but depending where you want to buy, some of these areas will only have negative cash flow, but could potentially have better appreciation. So either if you choose to do a lower down payment route, or you choose more of a prime area, you may have to sustain a negative cash flow, maybe even for the first few years. But as we'll walk through, you may see this and actually decide that it's worth it. This video is also for people who understand that Dallas is going to be a high demand market for the foreseeable future, so they want to participate in the gains that are going to follow. Again, the population increases by more than 400 people every day. And then some of you investors are going to be cash investors. A lot of my cash investors, what they're looking for is a 5 to 6% annual return on that cash, after, of course, taxes and insurance, and that is totally doable year 1. And obviously, due to the ever-growing demand here that leads to not just home appreciation but also rent appreciation, that 5 to 6% return on your cash year 1 is going to be the least return you'll ever see. It does go up over time as rents appreciate. So if you're still watching and all of this sounds like you, that's great. If you happen to have stumbled upon this and you've been listening to a lot of Bigger Pockets, where you've been hearing about guys making $500 a month cash flow on the $90K house they got in Detroit, that's because Detroit is a cash flow market, whereas Dallas is an appreciation market, meaning a place like Detroit has very low demand compared to the supply. Not a lot of people are jumping to move to Detroit and drive the prices up. But even if you're a Bigger Pockets guy trying to house hack a fourplex with an FHA loan, I still think you should watch this video just to see the other side of investing, and hopefully you'll understand why I actually think investing in a prime market like Dallas for appreciation is a much better move than investing in a cash flow market. So let me further explain the difference between a cash flow market versus an appreciation market. Let's start with the cash flow market. The first thing you need to understand is that if your goal is maximum cash flow, then what you're really looking for is the least desirable property in the least desirable area. That's where you can get maximum cash flow because nobody wants to buy that house. It's the lowest demand, so the lowest competition, so the lowest price. And this is true of any city anywhere. But here are some realities of owning a home like that. It will certainly need repairs. It's going to take a lot more cash because you are going to have to do some repairs before, as well as the maintenance costs down the road are going to cost you a lot more. The tenant is probably going to be very poorly qualified. They may not even have a credit score or possibly even a bank account in a lot of cases, which means you're going to have to go collect cash from them every month. And of course, without credit or background checks, you have literally no idea who this person is. But in theory, if that person you rent to happens to be a great tenant and they pay on time, then this will be where you'll yield the maximum cash flow. Least desirable home, least desirable area, maximum cash flow. So every step you go up from that, little nicer house, little nicer area, you're gonna lose a little bit of cash flow every step you go. So by the time you get all the way up to brand new construction, which is as nice as it gets for rentals, in a fast growing, fully developed suburb and the #1 fastest growing market in the country, by the time you get way up there, you are hoping to break even. Or depending on the area, maybe even take a negative cash flow. And I always tell my investors, you realistically need to be putting 25% down. A lot of new investors come in saying, I just want to do 20% down. But if you do 20% down, your mortgage rate is going to be significantly worse. I had a client get approved the other day. They wanted to do 20% down. Their mortgage rate was going to be about 7.8%. If they did 25% down, it was going to be 7.125%. That is a massive difference on your monthly payment. Just that extra 5%, the bank sees it so much more secure that they give you a way lower mortgage rate. And that's the difference between breaking even or having a very negative cash flow. So from here on out, I want you to assume that 25% is the minimum down payment you're going to do, which I already factored in when I told you somewhere between 85 to 100 grand. That figure includes a 25% down payment, closing costs, everything. So one final time, a cash flow market is simply a less desirable market with less desirable homes. And this brings us to the biggest dilemma of every new investor. New investors only care about one thing, and that's cash flow. And that was me when I first started, which many times will lead them to buy terrible properties that end up costing them way more money down the road. In exchange for having a $200 a month cash flow, it ends up costing them way more in bad tenants and repairs. Which is also why I said at the beginning of this video, one of the requirements is you need to have a good amount of cash in the bank, a good amount of income, and presumably be able to sustain a slightly negative cash flow temporarily. Maybe year 1, maybe year 2, but you gotta be someone who is not worried about a negative $200 a month cash flow for the first year. Now, a lot of people understandably start to feel uneasy when I'm saying negative cash flow. But think of it this way. When you buy your stocks every month, you're just dollar cost averaging. You found a company or an index you like, and you're gonna invest the same amount in it regardless of where the price is. Because you know in the long run, it's gonna be worth a lot more than it is now. It's the same with this house. You can choose a nicer house in a nicer area, or to put less cash down today, and simply commit to dollar cost average $150, $250 a month on this house. Because again, you see this as at least as good of an investment as those dollar cost averaging stocks that you have. So technically it's negative cash flow. Realistically, it's just dollar cost averaging. If you want a nicer house in a nicer area, you can commit to paying the difference of $150 to $250 a month to own the nicer house in the nicer area. Okay, so that's everything about a cash flow market, which personally is not something I'm after anymore. Once you've experienced the power of appreciation, cash flow becomes way less important. And you'll see that reflected in the numbers here in a bit. So hopefully by now you can see that Dallas is not what you would consider a cash flow market. And why is that? There is simply too much buyer demand here. And I mean way too much demand. Again, it's the #1 fastest growing metro in the entire country. There is literally not a single place in the entire country with more home buyer demand than Dallas. And when demand increases faster than supply, what happens? You know the law of supply and demand, prices go up. So the obvious downside to a high demand metro like we have here is prices generally are always rising, which means you're never gonna feel like you're getting a deal. But as you're gonna see, simply owning a property in a high demand market like this is a great deal all on its own. So why would it be better for you to buy a home in a negative cash flow market like this? Because most of these markets we're gonna look at today have seen an average of 12 to 14% annual appreciation for the last decade. Some are even higher. Not to mention average annual rent appreciation of greater than 6%. And this is all happening while mortgage rates are still around 7%. What do you think happens when rates go down to 6% or even 5%? In fact, when mortgage rates got as high as 8%, that didn't even drop our prices here. So hopefully by now you can see there are huge benefits to owning in an appreciation market. Consistent high demand. The reality is, cash flow is pennies compared to appreciation. In other words, if you're worried about cash flow in a market like Dallas, then you're just looking at the wrong number. On a $350K rental, a 13% annual appreciation is a $45,500 or more gain every single year you own it on average. Even if you want to be very conservative like I do and assume that we only see half of that appreciation over the next decade, that's still about $23,000 a year in appreciation. That's 50% of what actually happened. So before you pass on a market like this because you think you need $300 a month of cash flow, please understand what you're actually trading. $300 a month in cash flow would be $3,600 annual gain. In order to have that $3,600 peace of mind, you're potentially missing out on owning in a market that would have had a $45,500 annual return on average every single year for the last decade. $45,000 a year or $3,600 a year. Those numbers are not even close. I won't bore you with that anymore. I hope you understand the difference between cash flow markets and appreciation markets. So just take 1 minute, shift your mind off of cash flow and onto dollar cost averaging and investing for appreciation. And I touched on this a minute ago, I just want to clarify a little bit. Mortgage rates for investors putting 20% down are typically going to be about 0.8 to a full 1% worse than market rates for owner occupants. So if you were to look online today and see that conventional mortgage rates are at 7% on average, then you as a 20% investor can expect your rate is actually going to be 7.8 to 8%, which is again why I said you need to plan for 25% down. Then your rate will automatically go way down, more like 7.125%. which is barely higher than market rates. So I just want to clarify that confusion because a lot of times people will see a builder offering a 4.5% FHA rate. That doesn't apply to you at all as an investor. Speaking of which, let's talk about builder incentives for investors. The maximum incentive any builder can give an investor is 2% of the purchase price towards closing costs, plus they'll pay your title policy. And pretty much every builder right now will give you those incentives, but those are literally the maximum allowed by the conventional investment loan guidelines. So they can't give you any more money than that. Then on top of that, some builders will give you the fridge, washer, dryer, garage opener, blinds, sometimes gutters. All of those are extra things they can give that don't normally come with the house. And then on top of those two, some builders will let you purchase a promotional rate. So I had a lot of clients last year get a 5.5% rate. And at least one investor got to get that 5.5 for as little as $3,600 at closing. So again, they don't give you a low rate because they can't give you any more money, but they give you the option to buy it down. Sometimes to buy down to a 5.5 was $9,500 and sometimes it was $3,600, and that depends on your credit, how much you're putting down, as well as where market rates are at the time that you're buying it down. But just know you will have the option to buy it to a 5.5, and actually for a minute there, some communities were letting you buy to a 4.99. But generally speaking, it usually is worth spending that money to buy it down that low. But not all builders offer this, and certainly not all the time. So it's always a combination of finding which builder has a house that they're ready to give a good discount on, which builder's offering enough incentives to get you a low rate, and the rents have to be good enough. It's a whole combination of things when I'm looking for a rental. And when one pops up, you have to be ready to move on it. I just want you to know it's not like you can go to a community and there are 10 houses to choose from. There's only gonna be one. When that one drops its price, that will get you a break even. Okay, so that was a super long intro. I hope that you're fully educated on those things because I'm ready to move on and look at actual specific areas now. We're gonna be looking at 5 different markets today. For each area, we'll start by looking at things like the average rent appreciation for that area over the last decade, then the housing appreciation over the last decade. Then we're gonna look at what the numbers would look like for you if you were to buy one of these rentals today with wherever rents are today in that area. And then we're gonna project your profits moving forward based on what actually has happened over the last decade. And these are the 5 markets we're gonna look at today. The first one is Crowley. This one's probably my favorite right now. The numbers I think are the best here. This is about 20 minutes from downtown Fort Worth. And if you haven't heard of Fort Worth, it just passed Austin, Texas in population. So it's almost 1 million people in population. It's the FW of the DFW Metroplex. A lot of people really haven't heard of it, but it's the 4th largest city in Texas. It's no small place. So being 20 minutes from a downtown area, there's a lot of opportunity for employment, rents are good, and it's a very nicely developed area. After that, we'll take a look at Anna, which is up in Collin County. I know a lot of you are going to be asking me about Collin County, so we're going to look at Anna, followed by Melissa, which is known for its very highly rated school district in Collin County. Then Princeton, which is my least favorite place to invest, but people always ask me about it, so I want to address it. It's also in Collin County. And then for number 5, we're actually going to head east of Dallas about 25 minutes to Forney, Texas, which is another fast-growing area that if you're willing to take just a little bit of negative cash flow, I think it could be a really good area to hold a property in. And then just so you know how I came up with all these numbers, I got the rent and sales appreciation numbers by looking on the MLS for single-family detached homes that leased or sold all of January 2015 and then compared it to all of January 2025. That's how I got these numbers. Also, I looked at both average and median numbers for both of these, and I took the lower of the two because I always want to be more conservative. So if median was lower than average, then I used the median. I would always rather be more conservative than not. So first up, let's start with what I already told you is my favorite area at the moment. It's right on the border of Fort Worth, Crowley, Texas. There are a few specific communities in this area where I've had a lot of success for my investors over the last year. These communities are only going to be about 20 minutes from downtown Fort Worth, and still it's growing in every direction. And currently there is an H-E-B grocery store and a Super Target being built right across the tollway that you see. And like I said, Fort Worth is a major city. It's larger than Austin. It's nearly 1 million people, 4th largest city in Texas. Here you'll have all the same healthcare shops, restaurants, and amenities of any Dallas suburb, but you'll be spending about $50,000 to $100,000 less even for the exact same floor plan. Everything you see in this video is literally 5 minutes from most of these communities. Okay, this is my spreadsheet. It's probably going to be hard for you to read on your screen, but let's see what the data looks like for this area. So over the last decade, this area has experienced an average annual appreciation of 12% and 6.3% over here rent appreciation. If you were to list your rental today, you would be listing against just 16 competitors. And this is me looking, I know the type of house we'd be listing. So I'm not taking all of the houses in all of the areas. A lot of them are very old, very ugly, don't have anything to do with your house. So realistically, you would actually only be competing with 16 if you were to list a home like the one I'm going to show you today, which is very low competition. The average and median days to actually find a tenant and rent it out would be 50 and 46. I know that probably sounds high for you. I think only maybe one time have I even gotten to like 36 days before I found a tenant. So those sound high to me, but that's what the data was showing. And oh, you also need to know a lot of people why these numbers get skewed so high, they will start with some insane rent prices. And then like 3 or 4 months later, they'll start getting down to reality. And so I don't pull those out of the data because the data is the data. We got to see that's what it's actually taking, but it never takes me that long to do these. And in fact, the last one I rented out in this area only took me 1 day, and it was $2,600 a month. Literally, we got an application at least at the first day. But that's what it says, 50 average, 46 median. Here's an example of a home in one of my favorite communities here in Crowley, and I've had a lot of success renting these out for $2,500 to $2,600 a month, just depending on the size and plan that you choose. And keep in mind, in order for someone to qualify for a $2,600 a month rental, they have to make 3 times the rent. So these are people making a minimum of $94,000 a year. So they're generally very well qualified tenants compared to other areas. But the plan you're looking at right now, they have exactly one available today for just $335,000, which is an absolute steal. And right now that would include the fridge, washer, dryer, blinds, garage opener. But realistically, if you buy later in the year, you can expect a plan like this is going to cost you at least another $10K on average. So maybe around $345K for this plan. They do have some smaller, cheaper plans that also work as well. But at $335K, this one would be an absolute steal. So if you are ready today, call me right now because one of you needs to buy this. But it's a 4-bed, 2.5 bath, and it's 2,111 square feet, which is much larger than the normal rental. Typically, for a rental property, the numbers work best around a 4-bed, 2-bath, somewhere around 1,800 square feet. But that's because normally that's all you're going to get under $340K, where the rent still makes sense. But that just goes to show you how good of a deal this community is, where you can get over 2,000 square feet at this price. These homes also have bathtubs in the master bathroom, which is nearly unheard of at this price point, and it's definitely going to be a factor for resale. I'm having more and more buyers these days in this price point asking me for homes specifically with a master tub, and they almost never exist. Okay, I'll let you finish out this home tour, and then we'll take a look at the numbers for a property like this. So let's check the numbers on a house like this. At a $340K purchase price with your 25% down, that's $85,000. There will be some closing costs on top of that. I'm assuming a 7.125% mortgage rate. You might actually get a little better than that by the time you're seeing this video. And then assuming $2,600 in rents, in that scenario, your total monthly payment, including taxes, insurance, HOA, everything, and this is your 2.4% tax rate, it's gonna be somewhere around there. Your total payment is only $2,557 and your rents are $2,600. This is what I call a break even all day long. Even though it has a little cash flow, that's a break even. This is exactly what we're hoping to accomplish. And I call it a break even because on the off chance that when you're listing, things start to slow down, maybe you have to rent it for $2,550 and then you're at a tiny negative cash flow, still a break even. Maybe you have to go even all the way down to $2,500. You're still only at a negative $57 a month cash flow. I still call that a break even. But like I said, in this area, I have rented for $2,600 and there shouldn't be a problem doing that. Just want you to understand what I mean by a break even. It could be plus or minus $50. And of course, one of those houses right now would come with garage opener, blinds, fridge, washer, dryer, everything. So you don't need to spend another dollar on it. It's fully ready to go. So assuming all of those things I just told you, year one, you're gonna have a net gain of $516 cash flow wise, which again doesn't matter. We're not really caring about cash flow. What we wanna see is the appreciation. On average, it's been a 12% annual. So you start at $340 and by year 10, you would have just in appreciation, I know this is gonna sound crazy, but bear with me, $600,000 of appreciation. The house would be worth $942,000. And I know that sounds insane. It sounds like it to me too, but that's literally what happened. Okay, we can't deny what happened. And you also have to wonder, what is the value of the dollar gonna look like 10 years from now? Because you can see this in areas like Frisco, like Prosper. In Prosper, during COVID, I had a client contract a house for like $450,000, and 1 year later when it was built, it was like $730,000 is what it appraised for when they closed on it, just in 1 year. So I know it sounds impossible, but if you've seen what's going on in the real estate market, it's not impossible, and a lot of it has to do with the value of the dollar going down every year. But again, it sounds crazy to me too. That's just the reality of what happened. And then by year 10 also, you would have an almost $9,000 cash flow every year. Which brings us down here. By year 10, if you get that $600,000 appreciation and all of the cash flow added up cumulatively, you would have gotten a 767% cash on cash return. So your initial 85, 90,000, whatever, you would have made about a 767% return on that. But because I'm conservative and that does sound crazy, for every one of these markets, I'm gonna say, well, what happens if we just assume half of the actual appreciation? So if even half of the actual appreciation happens over the next decade, then by year 10, you've seen $234,000 appreciation. The house is now worth $574,000. Totally reasonable to me over 10 years, absolutely. And then your cash flow by year 10 is $4,935. And I also want you to know this cash flow number does account for, as time goes on and this house appreciates, it is factoring in the higher taxes. So this cash flow is factoring in that taxes are going to go up at the same rate that the price goes up, even though realistically these property taxes will probably go down. In newer areas over time, as more people move in and they need less tax dollars, taxes will actually go down. So this is kind of the worst case cash flow number. And at the 50% by year 10, you'd have $234,000 appreciation. With all your cumulative cash flow, you'd have a net gain of $260, almost $2,000, which would be about a 308% return on your cash. And of course, the bulk of that is from this $234,000 of appreciation, which is why appreciation markets are so much better than cash flow markets. So this is my favorite market right now. If you need to break even and feel comfortable and you want to have a great return, this is where I would be buying. Forney, Texas is a fast-growing suburb here in Collin County, and it's only about 15 minutes from McKinney, Texas, which is a major city with more than 240,000 people. Everything you see here is only going to be about 5 minutes from your house. You've got groceries, banks, pharmacies, workout facilities, anything you need for your daily life. And again, for something major like a Best Buy or a movie theater, you're only going to be about 15 minutes from McKinney. So let's check out an actual home. This is one of the cheapest homes in a community that will actually sell to investors. And by the time you see this video, they may already be closed out anyway, but whatever we could find in Anna is gonna look something like this anyway. But this one is 1,833 square feet. It has 3 bedrooms plus an office, and if you really needed a 4th bedroom, you could easily convert that front office. It's very easy to put a wall there. It has 2 bathrooms, and after incentives, you could pick one of these up for around $350K. But like I said, there were only a few left at the time I filmed this, so they may not even be there now. But that's the number we're gonna work on, is $350K. So I'll let you finish up this tour real quick, and then we're gonna look at the numbers. All right, now we're looking at the numbers here in Anna, Texas, starting with you would be competing with an insane number of 73 other homes on the market right now. To get it rented out would have an average and median of 67 and 52 days. The home is obviously gonna be more expensive than Crowley was, which means your 25% down payment is by itself over $91,000, so you're gonna be closer to the $100,000 total cash mark here. The average appreciation was pretty similar at 12.6%. The rent appreciation similar at 6.5%. The tax rate is lower here on some communities, so instead of 2.4, it's 2%. But the biggest thing I want you to see, and this is what happens in Collin County and places where it's a more desirable county to live in, so the prices are gonna be higher, the rents do not translate. So if you'll remember, in Crowley, a 340K house was renting for $2,600 a month, whereas here, a 365K house is only renting for $2,250 a month. So assuming a 7.1% mortgage rate, factoring in taxes, insurance, HOA, your total monthly payment is gonna be $2,635. Rents are only gonna be $2,250. So you're taking a negative $385 a month cash flow. And I would say, that's actually not bad for Collin County. And I know, like, so many of you call me about Collin County, and I need you to understand the reality. It's for that same reason. So many people think, well, if it has good schools, well, if it's towards this thing and it's gonna grow for this reason or that reason, you end up competing with so many investors that your house may be sitting 67 days, you're competing against 73 similar listings, and you're gonna end up with a negative 385 cash flow. All because you're really gambling really big on there being an outsized appreciation. But if this 12.6% appreciation were to happen again, I only look at the 50%, but I just gotta show you this because it is the data. By year 10, you'd have a 752% return on that cash. 697 of it is from appreciation, and you actually net overall will end up losing money on the cash flow overall year 10. You'll see it does turn positive here, but the first few years are so negative that even though you have 697,000 appreciation, you actually only end up with 686 cumulative profit. I would much rather break even than take the full-on gamble of this thing has to appreciate in a really outsized way. But let's look at the 50%. If just half of what actually happened repeats, you'll end up at year 10 with 267,546 in appreciation, but your rents will still be negative at year 10. And the reason that happens is property prices are going up faster than the rent prices are going up. So like I said, the taxes are going up, and you're never actually able to get out of that negative cash flow if 50% of what actually happened repeats. By year 10, you still have a 263% cash on cash return. So that's what it looks like in Anna. Hopefully you can see why I currently prefer Crowley. Melissa, Texas is a very popular name in Collin County because it has extremely highly rated public schools for the price point. It's a nice, fast-growing area located right off Highway 75. It's only about 10 minutes to all the shops and restaurants of McKinney, which again is a major city with over 200,000 people. In other words, it's the most desirable area that we'll be looking into today. But right now they're building a brand new H-E-B grocery store. They also just literally like a month ago just opened this brand new Kroger, which again just tells you they're expecting a lot of growth to come into this area. Okay, if you were buying a rental in Melissa today, it would likely be in this community that does sell to investors. They happen to have this one available right now for just $415K, which is an incredible deal because it's a larger plan than what you'd normally get for this price. And in this community, you actually do have the option to build a plan from the ground up. It would take about 6 months. These are semi-custom homes, so you do have the option to choose your finishes if you build. But for investment purposes, that doesn't really make sense because it will for sure just cost you more money. The biggest discounts and incentives are always given on homes that are already completed, so that's what you need to be targeting as an investor, not building from the ground up. But there is almost always a good 2-story plan here like this, discounted somewhere around $415K that's ready to buy here. This one is a 4-bed, 3 full bath, and it's nice because it has a second full bed and bath on the first floor. A lot of people really want that, but it's 2,327 square feet, and this particular one backs up to a nice green space as well. Overall, super nice house. Let's finish out the tour and look at some numbers. Okay, now we're looking at numbers in Melissa. Melissa only has 16 competitors similar to the one that I just showed you. Now, Melissa has had a huge appreciation of 15.7% annually for the last decade, but a lot of that is Melissa, as well as Princeton, we're gonna see in a minute, were very, very small. So when I took the sample sizes, we're talking about like 5 to 10 homes I had to look at as comps. Now there's obviously way more. So I don't know that that growth could continue at that pace, but I still gotta show you what actually happened. And their rent appreciation was 7.8%. Their tax rate in a lot of these communities is gonna be around 2, maybe 2.1%. Their average to median days to rent is 50 and 46, very similar to Crowley, but the prices here are much higher because Melissa has a top rated school district. It's the first city as soon as you leave McKinney. So we're looking at a $415,000 purchase price, which means your 25% down payment is gonna be almost $104,000. So it's already taking a lot more cash. Your total monthly payment with taxes, insurance, HOA is gonna be $2,989, and these houses will only rent for $2,600. If you'll remember, in Crowley, a $340K house would rent for $2,600. In Melissa, a $415K house is gonna rent for the same $2,600, which is gonna give you a negative about $390 cash flow every month starting out. Now, this is where it's absolutely insane because 15.7 is such a huge average annual appreciation. It's saying that this house is gonna be worth 1.54 million in a decade. I don't think so. Like I said, this was a tiny market to begin with, which is how it got so outsized. So I wouldn't even be looking at this number, but I just gotta show you. And if that really happened, then by year 10, you would have a 1,084% return on your cash, and this house is worth 1.54 million. So let's skip that and actually look at even 50% is gonna be a little crazy because it's saying at year 10, this house is gonna end up at $819,000, which honestly, that sounds a lot more realistic because that sounds way more similar to what happened in Prosper and all the rest of Collin County. So even though it's 50% of what happened, this sounds a lot more realistic. By the end of year 10, your house is almost $820,000, $404,000 in appreciation. You're going negative every year until the very end for that same reason, prices appreciating too fast for rents. And by the end of year 10, if 50% of what really happened repeats, you'll have a 368.26 cash on cash return. So there you have it for Melissa. Up next is Princeton, Texas. I'll just tell you right now, I'm not personally a big fan of Princeton. It is an area that a lot of people call me about because it has the cheapest housing prices in Collin County, but the reason prices are so cheap is simply because the location is not desirable, and in many communities, the taxes are also high because of a pit or mud tax. For me, Princeton is oversaturated as a rental market. There are too many rentals here, and as a result, rents are pretty low, yet many people still want to buy rentals here simply because it's in Collin County. And to get to Princeton, you've got to go down Highway 380, which has so many stoplights, and in traffic hour, you can sit at the same stoplight 3 times before you get through. So just to give you an example of this traffic, it's 10:21 a.m. on a Friday. I still have 16 minutes. Look how far I've gone. I'm about halfway to the highway and still have 16 minutes. And there is no reason there should be this much traffic at 10:21, but it's literally just because of all these stoplights. So that's Princeton for you. Okay, here is a good example of a home you could get in Princeton around $350K. It's a 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,818 square feet. It's a perfectly nice house. Check it out and we'll look at some numbers here in a minute. Now we're checking out the numbers for Princeton, and I just want to start by showing 79 competitors is a ton of competitors. Average to median days to rent, 73 and 53. Very high. It's going to take you a long time to get these things rented out because Princeton is a very oversaturated rental market. So many people bought there because the houses are the cheapest in all of Collin County, simply because the location is the worst in all of Collin County, and now you are competing against 79 homes. But the other reason they buy here is they see this 15.6% average annual appreciation, but the same as Melissa, this was such a tiny market. Nobody used to live here. This cannot continue, in my opinion, not even close. And I used a tax rate of 2.4%. Realistically, this could be as high as 2.7% in a lot of these communities. They have a lot of pit and mud taxes here. And then you've had a 7% rent appreciation on average. So looking at a house that would be $350K, your total payment is going to be $2,526, and realistically, it's going to rent for $2,300. Now, somebody's going to tell me, well, I see houses there listed at $2,700 that are the same size. Those houses don't rent. I don't know why people list them that high. It's probably why the days on market are so high. I'm telling you, realistically, what the MLS data is showing is if you want to get this house rented out, it's going to be $2,300 a month. And again, sounds insane. It's saying that this $350,000 home will be worth $1.3 million. I don't think so in 10 years, but if it happened, you'd have a 1,059% cash on cash return at year 10. So let's look at the 50%. If just 50% actually repeats, then your cash flow will be negative the entire time, but you will have $338,000 of appreciation. Your house will be worth $688,000. At least sounds much more realistic. I don't think Princeton's going to appreciate the same way as Melissa has because it is just not as good of a location. It is much harder to get to. But assuming that 50% does repeat, you end up with a 368% cash on cash return by year 10. So that is Princeton. All right, our final area for the day is Forney, Texas, and Forney is only 24 minutes east of downtown Dallas without traffic. It's a fast-growing city that has all of the amenities you'll need, and its proximity to downtown is what makes it so desirable because you can live here and actually commute to downtown Dallas. The only problem with Forney is a lot of communities don't sell to investors right now, so it's a little harder to find a rental here because you have to find the one-off home that's been sitting long enough where the builder is actually willing to sell it to an investor. Also, this is an area where you can't just look at the purchase price because a lot of these communities will have tax rates up to like 2.7% after the pit or mud tax. So from one community to the next, your tax rate could be 0.7% higher, and you're just looking at the purchase prices. You don't know that one of these homes is going to cost you an extra $300 a month. But the home you're looking at here, this is actually a rental that I did sell to an investor, got it rented out. It took I think 2 weeks. It rented for $2,500 a month, and the purchase price was in the low 300s. I want to say it was somewhere around a 320, and so it wasn't exactly a break even. It was maybe like a negative 50 a month, something like that. But it is a super nice house. I think it's just about 2,100 square feet, but it has a nice big game room, which is not normal for single stories, as well as it has the master bath. As I've discussed, most rentals are not going to have that. So Forney, you can actually get a really nice house at a really low price. You've just got to look out for the taxes, and the hardest part, again, is finding one that actually sells to investors. But this one was a big win for this investor, and I just think this is a really good area to hold property in if you can take a slightly negative cash flow. Now looking at the numbers for our final market, Forney, and Forney is a more well-established rental market in my opinion. It's been a rental market for a long time. I guess you could call it stabilized-ish. Currently, if you were to list, you would have 45 competitors, which is more than normal, but there are a lot of renters here. Their average and median days to rent are 48 and 40, so still quite a bit less than Princeton. They've only had a 10.9% average annual appreciation, but like I said, this is a more established market. It had its burst, it kind of came and leveled out, and I think realistically, probably something like this is what we're gonna see in Princeton moving forward. And then they've had a rent appreciation, which is high at 7.1%. I put the tax rate here at 2.7% because a lot of communities here do have pit and mud taxes that get it around there. Looking at a 330K house here, your total payment is going to be around just under $2,600. Your rents are going to be about $2,500. So you do start out negative, but because they had so much rent appreciation, you get positive pretty quickly here in Forney. It's saying that by year 10, which again, this is way more reasonable than 16% or whatever we were seeing in Collin County. You would end up with an 837K house, $507,000 of appreciation, and a total cash-on-cash return of 670%, which would be $553,000 net gain. And then being conservative, or what I like to call more realistic, assuming 50% actually repeated of what actually happened, by then your house is worth a very reasonable $532,000 in 10 years. That's still a $202,000 gain of appreciation. You're going to be making $4,458 at year 10 just of cash flow, and that's annual. And your total cumulative cash on cash return is going to be 264%. So that is our final market. That is Forney. So if you happen to still be with me, I have no idea how you made it through that much data, but in summary, for the last time, Dallas is just not a cash flow market. If you're buying for cash flow here, you're just looking at the wrong number. Now, the last piece of this puzzle I always get asked about is property management. A lot of my out-of-state buyers ask about this because they're not here, but in my opinion, it would just be a huge waste of money. You're gonna be paying somebody more than $150 a month to do pretty much nothing, because this is a new construction home and everything is going to be under warranty at least for year 1. And after that, if somebody clogs the plumbing, it's a 10-minute phone call. You just Google plumber in my area, call them up, tell them, here's the tenant's number, can you go fix it? I do not think you need to be paying $150 a month for that. So the way it works is, I will find you the tenant. I charge 50% of 1 month's rent to do this, which is the same as property management companies are going to charge. But as long as I do my job well and I find you an awesome tenant, then you should almost never hear from them again. Because of course, it's a brand new house. So in my opinion, if you're just having one house here, even up to 3 houses here, you're going to be just fine managing it yourself. Now, if you've made it this far and you understand the numbers and you see the value in investing in a high demand market like this, and you want to hold real estate here for decades to come, call me right now and let's get you started. Well, I've now been filming for an insane amount of time. I'm off to get some water. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my weekly updates. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.